Hello, Christian here. I'm the host of the Disruptive Entrepreneur Show. And I know I say this at every episode. You guys gonna love today's guest. How often do you come across somebody who is just absolutely amazing, not just in what they do? They've been trying to unlock sustainable seafood in our culinary world for over 35 years. He's a CEO of an amazing company. He's a pioneer in the food industry. And all of that, he's a really amazing guy. And you guys gonna meet him right after this. Hello again. My name is Christian. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show. I'm really excited for today's guest. I had the opportunity to meet him now over 20 years ago. And it's upsetting because he looks the same as he did 20 years ago. I also learned he's in the industry now 35 years for sustainable seafood. And I always tell the story. I've been to one of his facilities now like 20, 25 years ago. And it was in New Jersey. I don't try to go to New Jersey unless I have to, but he made me go to New Jersey. And that place was absolutely spectacular. And I learned so much about tuna and so many other cool things. The fish still moved as we defrosted it. I mean, it was just absolutely an amazing experience. And if any of you listeners out there looking for amazing seafood, you guys need to hook up with this guy. With that, here, I want to welcome Chef Michael McNicholas. How are you, Michael? How you doing?
Hi, Christian. How are you? I'm doing great, and thank you for having me.
So you just came back from international travel. So tell our listeners a little bit where you're calling in from and how did this whole thing come to be, being a 35-year veteran in sustainable seafood?
Um, the short version, I wasn't always in food. Going back about 30 years ago, I was in uh, process optimization, and I was working for a company called Mitsubishi. And you'll be surprised to know that they don't just make your TVs and your cars. They're also the world's largest tuna dealer and the third largest salmon farmer in the world. They own Cermaq. Um, they hired me to help fix a super frozen tuna division. I had no idea what super frozen tuna was, but my job was to help fix and get it into the black and not so much to worry about the tuna. We had it fixed, and they decided to pull out of the market. Tuna supply was becoming more and more difficult, and they foresaw the 2008 market collapse coming, because they have an economics department, the envy of France. We sold the division rather than shutting it down. We sold it to another Japanese company called Wariki Company, Japan's top fishmonger. And one of the conditions of sale was they wanted me to join them. And thus began my journey in sushi. A number of years later, they also withdrew from the market. I was already working with sushi ingredients on my own. So I basically inherited the business, took it over, and here we are today, fast forwarding 2024.
It's awesome. I love that story. And I always love the idea of minus 76 degrees. Remember, that was their website.
Yes.
And it was just, it was ahead of its time. And I always tell the story. I said, you walked in, that place smelled more like a hospital than a seafood place. It was so, and the fish was so amazingly fresh. And I brought a team of my chefs at the time with me, and they all walked out. I said, I will never eat any other fish again. He just ruined me for life. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. And thanks for being so gracious and hosting us. It was absolutely amazing. And this is now what, almost 30 years ago? Because I've been still talking about that.
I remember standing in the super freezer with you, and less than a minute in, you started to remark that your breath wasn't quite gassy any longer. It was starting to solidify. I'm like, yes, we have a limit in here before we start to harden up ourselves.
I,
So we should
I
probably
know.
go back to warmer climes.
Hey, I'm native Austrian, but it was too much for me. I do remember that. So we understood. And that's the reason I tried to came to America. It was too much snow and too cold back home. But I love the
Mhm.
story. So uh, our audience here is chefs and hospitality professionals. And a lot of them, um, I think, would be very interested to know. Yeah, I love that. But how did you get the company you work for to give you, a business now worth 20 million? Talk to us a little bit. How do you even start that conversation? I know there's a lot of chefs and hospitality professionals out there which know they would have an opportunity to do something, not at that scale, but
Hmm.
how do you make that pivot? Because I'm sure it must be, very nervous or nerve-wracking doing this on your own. So talk to us a
Hmm.
little bit. What were some of the biggest challenges you had to face by growing that
Well,
market?
I think I think a lot of your listeners will be encouraged by the concept that it's really about knowledge. If you are if you're passionate about something, you tend to go really, really deep and learn about your subject. And that's what I did. I got really deep into it and what is super frozen and why is it used and what makes it so special. So I became uh, quite expert in the whole concept of it. It's basically cryogenic preservation, and understanding that tuna is a red muscle meat, and once a tuna passes, and the same thing that'll happen to any red blood celled animal is that we'll start to oxidize. Once air touches blood, the blood starts to turn brown. Just like if you have a little cut and it'll scab up, it'll brown.
Yeah,
Um, so, super freezing or cryogenic preservation just stops everything. At minus 76, bacteria go into stasis. Um, there is no chemical interactions, there are no microbiological interactions. So basically, if that's the case, it's kind of like time has stood still. And if time stands still, then there's no degradation to the product.
hmm
And it's pretty simple. It was actually a discovery in the U.S. medical industry back in the 50s. Um, you go to your doctor and have a biopsy taken. By the time the sample hit the lab, it was already cooked, so it wasn't much use. You
yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
get accurate results. So the discovery of using liquid nitrogen to perfectly preserve a sample um, was translated in the food industry by Japan into preserving high value foods such as tuna.
hmm
And to this day, it's absolutely commonplace across Asia, and indeed, 80% of all tuna sold in Japan is super frozen tuna. So, getting deep into the subject brought more and more opportunities to me, and um, tackled each one as it came along, much like you do in with a kitchen, with a new restaurant, with a second restaurant. Um, deep knowledge attracts conversation, and
Yeah, yeah.
conversation attracts opportunity.
I love that. That's very much in line what we have here. You create. I honestly believe we creating conversation because
Mm,
if you don't express to the things you're up to and what you would like to gain, people
mm,
can provide value and people can provide feedback. So for me, it's really simple. I love that about you. So
mm.
talk to us a little about your approach of opening that West Coast branch and what were some of the lessons you learned in that process?
Um, this was another opportunity that came out of lots and lots of conversations. Luckily, I really like people. I like interacting with people. I like talking to people. I suppose being Irish, we're told we have the gift of the gab, and that's probably largely true. Um, Out of that, I was introduced to a company that was for sale on the West Coast, a small artisanal sushi company. And I thought, what a great opportunity this would be. It would be quite a vertical expansion if we were to do it, because we sell ingredients to sushi operators mostly.
Yeah.
But what an opportunity! And with my team, it's like, yes, this will give us the opportunity to practice what we preach, test our thesis, experiment with new and exciting ingredients, and have the ability to share with our customers a live environment. So, traveled to California, met the company, and really liked the people. There are 65 amazing people in the company, and some of them are there over 30 years. Um, I was told that California is not a great place to go. It's so tough. It's so difficult. Um, oh, and by the way, half your team are union members, and
Hmm.
I'm like, again, being Irish. Um, some of that might have been lost to me. I just ignored. I tend to not take a lot of notice of negative feedback and just go and find out for myself. And I went out there and I met the greatest bunch of people in the world, who loved what they were doing, and um, I just felt like you know these people need to be part of our family,
Yeah.
and and I wanted to be part of their family, and so we got into the conversation and we ended up coming to an agreement, and we bought the company. And Red Shell Sushi is the sushi company that produces fantastic sushi for Gelson's every day of the week in Southern California.
Hmm. I love that. So, at what point did you start then culinary collaboration, and how did that name come about?
Well, again, conversations. You know, there's an old saying in the culinary world that innovation is 95% um, uh, uh, 95% study and 5% inspiration. Um, and really, it's again engagement with other people.
Yeah.
Um, and I, good friend of mine, I have to give him credit for coming up with with the name. It's what do you do? I work with people. I work
Hmm.
together with people. We are not perceived as a vendor by our clients. We're perceived as a partner.
Hmm.
So you collaborate in the food world. Culinary collaborations sounds like what you're doing, and
I love that.
I love the idea of a company name communicating clearly what that company does. So
Mhm.
Culinary Collaborations, it was.
I love that. So let's pivot a little bit into the sustainability,
Mm,
because you've been in the forefront and you've been a really outspoken critic of people not following sustainability practices. So you've been
mm,
really in the forefront of sustainability, for a very long time. So
mm.
why sustainability, and where did that passion come from?
Um, it started um, when my children were very young, and just by virtue of looking at what we were feeding our kids, I began to realize just how much junk we put into our food. It's disgraceful. It's preservatives. Half the ingredients on processed foods are multisyllabic scientific words, which means it's not real. It's not natural foods. They're preservatives. They're colors. They're enhancers. Um, and you know, we went looking for clean food
Yeah.
along the path. We went looking for clean seafood, and that led me into talking with people who were at the very, very beginning of organic seafood in Europe. The first organic certified salmon farm in the world was actually, unbeknownst to me growing up, but was actually very close to my childhood home in the west of Ireland. And on a trip home, I went and spent time with that farmer, and I learned what organic meant. Up to that point, I had
Mhm.
no idea. And it just meant organic is just a set of standards, it's a set of measurable standards. But it happens to choose that those standards measure what you don't put into food as much as what you do.
Mhm.
Uh, so the next learning step after that was, well, organic led me into the whole sustainability movement. And again, in 2000, this was in its nascent period. It was
Mhm.
it was before it was fashionable. It was before it was even real, so to speak. But I was completely hooked, and I started to study and
Mhm.
started to work with fish farmers and visit fish farmers all over the world, um, that were uh, making efforts in the sustainability area.
Mhm.
And the story again was really appealing. And this meant I could feed my kids clean, wholesome food, um, and trust the food.
Mhm.
Sustainability also, that was the time where we were starting to see fishing stocks get into deep trouble, like cod. Um, and words like extinction were starting to be bandied around with different fish species. Um, it was the early days of organizations like the MSC and WWF um, and organic. So it was all really interesting for somebody that was curious. It was really, really interesting. But the overarching message was that if we didn't do something, there wouldn't be any stocks
Yeah.
for us to be able to enjoy or to harvest or to eat. Now, my my wife is Japanese, so I was going to Japan a lot too, and my deep love affair with seafood um, was really nurtured in Japan, and
Mhm.
it's 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 fascinating that they have a round to retail yield in Japan of over 90%,
Yeah.
whereas we tend to throw away half the fish before we even put it out for sale.
So true.
Um,
So
you
true.
know, people think salmon is something that's square and orange, doesn't have skin, doesn't have bones.
Yeah.
And, um, it's like milk comes from a jug. And, you know, I shudder to think if we did a city survey and showed people a picture of a cow, would they actually know what it was? So it's the same thing. Um, I don't think any of us uh, could identify as a whole round salmon
Yeah.
and
It,
tell the difference with a mackerel. So
I, I, so I had the opportunity to spend some time in Japan, and I encourage everybody to go. When people tell me what was my most favorite place, I said it's Japan, and it was for three reasons. Number one, the people were just super nice, and
mhm,
as a country, it's absolutely spectacular. and how entrenched culture and history is. And I'm a
Mm-hmm.
big history buff. It was just absolutely amazing. And so I listen, our listeners, if you have the opportunity to go, you need to absolutely go. So
Mm-hmm.
I will never forget, you gave a presentation. I don't know if you remember this, to some of my chefs. And as you did the presentation, one of my chefs asked, sustainability? What are you talking about? And how do I even start? And I will never forget what you said. You said, hey, you need to ensure that the food ingredients you use on the daily what you work with, make sure they truly sustainable and traceable. And that stuck with me for
Mm-hmm.
all these years, because I understood sustainable. I never really looked at traceable food.
Mm.
So for me, that was such an eye opener, and at the time, it changed totally the way we did food, and we were at the forefront in the way we provided organic food to college campuses at the time. So talk to us a little bit about that. Where did that come in?
Well, that came again from engaging with chefs, and back 20 years ago, that was when star chefs uh,
I remember that.
started to come into play. That's where um, uh, network TV started to bring food into the mainstream, and we started to have some chefs begin to become household names.
Mhm.
So chefs were becoming, even at that point, chefs were becoming more aware of um, the need to know where their food was coming from. I mean, the reality is, uh, if you get if you get a skin off fillet of an orange fish, how many people could tell whether that's a salmon, a trout, or a char? There are not many people who could tell the difference.
Yeah.
So, and if you take it back a little bit, even, okay, you delivered me a box of fish, and how do I know these fish come from the farm that you told me came from?
Yeah,
And that's where
I
traceability.
love that, because as we had that conversation, we bought from vendors we trusted, but as we
Mhm.
grew as an organization, we had to tap into some people we never did business with before.
Right.
And for me, um, you can only trust them to a certain extent, because if we have a message we put out on the
Mhm.
market, we better adhere to it.
Yep.
And you said that, and I'm going back, and I
Mm.
remember the gentleman who said it, and you said to him, Kelly, absolutely spot on. But do you trust them with your life? And
Mhm.
for me, that was what is he talking about? And
Mm.
can you talk to us a little bit, because very much into health, and what can happen if people do the wrong thing, especially on super frozen tuna, for example, because you did that
Mm.
presentation on super frozen tuna, because you said you can do this and make a great thing, or you can do this and get 100 people sick.
Right. Absolutely. And we have a phenomenon in the United States, a travesty, I would say, in the United States. Um, the vast majority of tuna sold in retail markets in the United States is this bright pinkish watermelon looking tuna. And that's basically the result of carbon monoxide gassing. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, tuna can turn brown rather quickly.
Mhm.
And for all of us, being able to see the color of a fish is one of the attributes that we use to determine freshness.
Yeah. So,
Now, if tuna is brown, certainly that means that the purveyor can't make as much money on it, might not even be able to sell it. But if they can find some way to convert that color to a permanent red, then they can present it as being wonderfully fresh tuna all the time. The problem with that is that carbon monoxide has this powerful impact on a red blood cell. It'll stabilize an unstable molecule and fix it as a bright pinkish red, as opposed to allowing it to turn brown,
mhm,
thus deceiving us, or thus depriving us of the ability to see what the actual age or condition of the tuna is.
mhm.
Now, The danger with that, Christian, is that we've been deprived of an attribute to check on age and color. So how old could it be? And it could have developed a histamine. It could have been cross-contaminated and already degrading, but you wouldn't notice that because it's carbon monoxide smoked.
Hmm.
And this, unfortunately, is prevalent across the US. Now, if you ever go into a supermarket and you see something wrapped in plastic, a piece of tuna that is previously frozen that looks this bright um, red color, or if somebody is trying to sell you AAA saku or AA saku or things like that, run like hell. Run like hell. You're taking a risk because there is absolutely no way to tell how old or how badly or how well handled that product was prior to cutting and freezing. Um, it's prevalent in the US because gas is used in meat. Hamburger meat is the primary use of this, and we all know that um, if we go into a market and we see the surface of the meat has turned brown, it's kind of like, I'm not entirely sure that's totally fresh.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I see some red meat, oh yeah, that's fresh. Well, that's not actually true. Surface browning is not a big deal,
Hmm.
and the minute you uh, mix the meat, you'll see that right underneath it's all red. Um, in the industry, for us, that's perfectly okay. But you would actually be amazed how many chefs can be misled by carbon
Yeah.
monoxide. Also, it's a travesty.
So you've been in this 35 years. What is a trick or maybe an industry secret you could teach our listeners to detect something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Anything that looks radioactively bright. um, we call There are a number of names in the industry for it. Tailpipe tuna is one of the names to reflect the carbon monoxide. Watermelon tuna is watermelon tuna is the simplest way. If it looks closer to watermelon than to real flesh, then that means that it's been gassed.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the manipulation methods have in of recent years they've expanded. Christian, it's most countries in the world don't allow the use of gas,
Hmm.
but like places like Canada, Europe, Australia, and something's pretty bad when China bans it. China
Hmm.
bans the use of CO tuna. However, um, the human instinct to find advantage never ceases to amaze.
It's creativity.
And actually, coming out of Europe, we have a whole variety of other ways of trying to quote unquote redden tuna. Uh, One is called vitamin tuna, and they're using vitamin C and or ascorbic acid.
Hmm.
And the salesperson coming in the kitchen is telling you this is vitamin tuna like it's a good thing. Um, Beet juice. Beet juice is being used. Lycopene, tomato extract
Hmm.
is being used. Um, and then there's the chemical version. Again, uh, way too many syllables in some of the chemicals that are used.
Yeah. Listen, I just had the opportunity to go to India for a business meeting. We were there for 10 days. And I was amazed on how broad the use of herbs and spices is to help food stay
Yeah,
fresh,
yeah.
um, and not necessarily to its benefit. And there's very little consumption on animal protein anyway, so there's less of a
Mm,
concern there. But
mm,
even on vegetable, on the sauces, and I was amazed. I was amazed. And for me, what I found fascinating was there was a company we partnered with, and that company makes natural, you know, herbs and spices for dog food because they
Mm,
said, "Oh, you guys in the US, you do chemicals. We have 4,000 herbs. We can do the same thing you can do with herbs."
mm,
So it was for me just very fascinating to have that conversation and how it creeps into not just our food. And I see the next thing is look where pet food and all the stuff which is going on with that category now. So talk to us a little bit. Where do you see seafood and just the whole sustainability landscape go over the next few years?
Well, consumers are becoming more and more educated. Information is available instantly today. Um, Younger generations are becoming more and more concerned with what they're putting into their bodies and what is contained in the food. You know, um, we look at companies that have popularized natural food over the past several decades. Companies like Whole Foods, um, and smaller all natural stores, organic stores, things like that. They haven't survived and thrived by accident. So consumers are um, absolutely more and more concerned. And as consumers, as incomes have kept up with the times, people have been able to afford to choose what they eat.
Mhm,
And so the natural market has expanded to a very, very large extent. We focus in clean food.
mhm,
That's the only thing we do. Um, and it's wonderful that a company like ours can find a market sufficiently large enough to not only survive but thrive in. Um, so I believe that our sustainability journey is it's not a fad or a fashion; it's actual reality.
mhm,
I'll give you one example again, using tuna again. Atlantic tuna, bluefin tuna, was felt to be heavily endangered in 2011, and they put some fairly strict guidelines in place. And and the tuna stocks recovered. It took 6 years for
yeah,
them to recover. By 2017, they were felt to be back in good condition, but the restrictions weren't lifted.
mhm,
Here we are now in 2024. And this past summer, we have seen story after story about 700 pound, 800 pound tuna being landed off the east coast of the US from Maine to Florida. You can't get big tuna if the stock is not in great shape. And it's the same thing on the European side of the ocean as well.
mhm,
So we have seen the recovery of cod stocks, of tuna stocks. We've seen the amazing recovery of the lobster in New
mhm,
England. And, you know, these stories of success encourage not only the fisherman, but the consumer that we can actually consume stocks in such a way as to preserve a minimum biomass to ensure future generations will breed and grow. So I think people are becoming not even used to, but demanding uh, of the requirement for their food to be sustainable.
mhm.
It's like I want to know that my kids will get to enjoy this Atlantic cod. Um, and by the way, it's quite possible. So please continue on with this.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
look at the MSC. The MSC has done a remarkable job as the leading um, wild fishery certifier.
Mhm,
Um, and they get a lot of abuse. But that's what happens to pioneers, really. They get a lot of abuse, but the great work that they've done in bringing a lot of the world's fisheries into focus um, has meant that we've brought a whole range of fisheries back from the brink of extinction.
mhm.
So
I
for
love
that
that.
reason alone, I'm a monster fan of sustainability.
I love that. So good. I love that answer. So, as we wrap this up, so what is the legacy you hope to leave in this food service industry?
Uh, Sushi is about 35 years old in the US. Um, it began in supermarkets. Supermarket sushi began about 25 something years ago. And it rapidly became terrible. And today, we see leaders in the delivery of retail sushi across America moving to sustainable ingredients, traceable ingredients, wholesome and healthy, clean ingredients. And we would like to encourage, and our core value is to enrich society through food. We would like to see that continue so that consumers can get to enjoy fabulous sushi no matter where they eat it.
I love that. I love that. So, for our listeners, if they want to learn more about culinary collaboration
Yep.
and Mr. Michael, where do they need to go?
You can go to www.culinary-collaborations.com or just do a search for Super Frozen.
I love that. And for our listeners, we're also going to put the show in the show notes, how to get a hold of Michael and his team, and a little bit of recap on what some of the takeaways was, because I think that was really, um, amazing insights. And for me, I learned so much about you, and I quote you all the time. And remember we were talking about how the sushi stores in the US and then the sushi stores in Japan, and you know what, Christian, females are making sushi, but they hide them in the back because a female's body is warmer than a man. All the things I have to learn from you, I'm still quoting, and it's so long ago. So for me, we need to do a 2.0 of that. And we certainly need to stay in touch. And our listeners, I know, will get a ton out of this conversation today. So I want to say thanks for the gift of your time. But before we leave, we would like to entice you to play Rapid Fire Question Food Service Edition, if you're up for it, Michael.
I'm up for it.
Okay, with that, we're starting Rapid Fire Question Food Service Edition. So, Michael, the way this works, my team gives me brand new questions every week. So these are actually next week's questions. You got them already today. 25 question. You give me a number. I read out the question and rapid fire. Okay, with that, give me a number between 1 and 25.
19.
19 is an oldie but goodie. Pineapple on a pizza, yes or no?
No.
There's a whole movement to bring pineapple back, so you just made a bunch of people very upset. Next number between 1 and 25.
Lucky 13.
13. Oh, have you ever made a food so bad you wouldn't even serve it to your worst enemy?
Oh, goodness. Yes, I am not a saucier, and I just don't get the art. And I once was trying to make a beurre blanc, and it was the most horrible, separated, broken concoction ever.
I love that. Give me a number between 1 and 25.
22.
22. Ooh, which dish you wish, if you could, make it disappear from menus forever, everywhere?
Meatloaf.
There's a whole culture on meatloaf. You just got yourself in the corner there. Okay, next number between 1 and 25.
6.
6. Ooh, if life were a cooking show, what would be your catchphrase?
Eat it now while it's hot.
We need to work on that. Okay, give me another number between 1 and 25.
16.
16. Ooh, if you were a kitchen gadget, what kitchen gadget would you be and why?
Dear, oh dear. Let's see. I would be a liquidizer because because I can blend and cover up. I can blend and cover up my mistakes.
Oh, that's the best. Okay, last question. Number between 1 and 25.
25.
Ooh, 25. What is a dish you would hope your wife's significant other would stop making forever?
Stop making or start making?
Stop.
Oh, that goes back to the meatloaf again. Not a big fan.
I love that. And that completes Rapid Fire Question Food Service Edition. So this was awesome. Michael, I want to say thanks for the gift of your time. Thanks for your friendship. As I started looking for, I found my small world. I want to make room in the garage to bring some stuff in. We have, frozen products. I need room for 2 more freezers in the garage. So I clean up my old, like a
Yeah,
tote. I go through it, and there was says, "Oh, meeting in New Jersey with you." And I go
yeah.
through the notes, and I find, oh my God, this is the best. And I was like, what a small world. I knew we gotta do this with you. I find the original notes from that meeting, what the follow-up team was, some of the things that I wrote things down. And I was like crazy. And I says, oh, I tell this story all the time. Oh, I do this all the time too. And then eventually, every time we made ice cream, cryogenically frozen made me think of you. So you've
Mhm.
been an inspiration and a mentor of mine for a very long time. We just never knew it. So with that, Michael, I really appreciate everything you do. And do appreciate you being on today's show. That was awesome. Any
Likewise.
last words of wisdom for our listeners?
Um, yes, it is just as easy to do it clean and to do it green as it is to do it otherwise.
I love that.
And there is no reason that it can't also be profitable.
I love that. Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being here today. Thanks again for being patient with us. And we had to reschedule this a few times, but I'm really excited we were able to have that conversation. And to our listeners, for additional content, behind the scene glimpses and updates of upcoming episodes, make sure you check out our websites and follow our social media channels. Also, if you haven't done so, make sure you join the Disruptive Chef Club, which is our private community, which gives you a front row seat of all the great things we do. So with that, I want to say thank you to you, Michael, for being here. Thanks to our listeners for listening in. And remember to disrupt your kitchen, fire up your career, stay hungry for change. I'm Christian, the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur host. I'm here with Michael, and we are out of here. So we are signing off. With that, be the change, be the challenge, and be the chef who sets the world on fire. Michael, thanks. That was awesome. We need to do 2.0. And to our listeners, make sure you go out there and stay disruptive. Thanks, everybody.